So then, if you awaken from this illusion, and you understand that black implies white, self implies other, life implies death, or shall I say, death implies life, you can conceive yourself, you can not conceive but feel yourself, not as a stranger in the world, not as something here on sufferance, on probation, not as something that has arrived here by fluke, but you can begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental. What you are basically, deep, deep down, far, far in, is simply the fabric and structure of existence itself. So, say in Hindu mythology, they say that the world is the drama of God. God is not something in Hindu mythology with a white beard that sits on a throne and that has royal prerogatives. God in Indian mythology is the self, Sat Chit Ananda, which means Sat, that which is, Chit, that which is consciousness, that which is Ananda is bliss. And in other words, what exists, reality itself, is gorgeous. It is the plenum, the fullness of total joy. Wow-wee. And all those stars, if you look out in the sky, as a firework display like you see on the 4th of July, which is a great occasion for celebration. The universe is a celebration. It is a fireworks show to celebrate that existence is. Wow-wee. And then they say, but however, you can't, there's no point just in sustaining bliss. Let's suppose that you were able every night to dream any dream you wanted to dream. And that you could, for example, have the power within one night to dream 75 years of time. Or any length of time you wanted to have. And you would, naturally, as you began on this adventure of dreams, you would fulfill all your wishes. You would have every kind of pleasure you could conceive. And after several nights of 75 years of total pleasure each, you would say, well, that was pretty great. But now let's have a surprise. Let's have a dream which isn't under control. Where something is going to happen to me that I don't know what it's going to be. And you would dig that and come out of that and say, wow, that was a close shave, wasn't it? And then you would get more and more adventurous, and you would make further and further out gambles as to what you would dream. And finally, you would dream where you are now. You would dream the dream of living the life that you are actually living today. That would be within the infinite multiplicity of choices you would have, of playing that you weren't God. Because the whole nature of the Godhead, according to this idea, is to play that he's not. The first thing he says to himself is, man, get lost. Because he gives himself away. The nature of love is self-abandonment, not clinging to oneself. Throwing yourself out, as in, for example, in basketball, you're always getting rid of the ball. You say to the other fellow, have a ball. See? And that keeps things moving. That's the nature of life.
West, hip-hop superstar and Kim Kardashian's eldest child. Kanye has been promoting a new album/presidential campaign, and it has not been going great.
Kanye West is moving forward with his campaign for president. He held a rally in Charleston, South Carolina yesterday.
Arriving on stage with the year 2020 shaved into the back of his head and wearing what appeared to be a military-style vest, West appeared to be putting forward policy proposals on the fly.
Everybody that has a baby gets $1 million or something in that event.
And at one point he broke down into tears while describing how he was nearly aborted by his parents.
There would have been no Kanye West because my dad was too busy. I will kill my daughter! I will kill my daughter!
One of the more controversial.
Our strategy to safely reopen schools mirrors our approach nationwide. As we race toward the completion of a vaccine and therapeutics, the responsible path is to shelter those at highest risk while allowing those at lower risk, much lower in the case of young children, to resume work at school, and as long as everyone practices vigilant hygiene and social distancing. We want that. A permanent shutdown was never the strategy which would ultimately lead to greater mortality and irreversible harms. We don't want to do that. At the same time, we have to get our economy going. We had tremendous numbers issued yesterday. Housing prices, pricing of housing up 21%. It's the highest in history. It's the highest number in history. Real estate housing went up 21%. Today, the CDC will provide additional guidance for how schools can reopen safely. I hope that local leaders put the full health and well-being of their students first and make the right decision for children, parents, teachers, and not make political decisions. This isn't about politics. It's about something very, very important. This is not about politics. I even think it's bad politics if you do the wrong decision. Very bad politics. We're asking Congress to provide $105 billion to schools as part of the next coronavirus relief bill. This funding will support mitigation measures such as smaller class sizes, more teachers and teacher aides, repurposing spaces to practice social distancing, and crucially, mask wearing. This money is in addition to the $30 billion we secured for schools and universities earlier this year. That money we have, some is distributed and some is not distributed. If schools do not reopen, the funding should go to parents to send their child to public, private, charter, religious, or homeschool of their choice. The key word being choice. If the school is closed, the money should follow the student, so the parents and families are in control of their own decisions. So we'd like the money to go to the parents of the student. This way they can make the decision that's best for them.
Everything that we do starts with an idea. We don't know what to do unless we have an idea. So ideas are like fish, and you don't make the fish, you catch the fish. You desiring an idea is like putting a bait on a hook and lowering it into the water. You can catch ideas from daydreaming, or you can catch ideas from places. If you think that maybe a place could conjure ideas, then you have to go out of the house and go traveling. You can be going down the street, see a reflection on a little pool in the gutter, and bang, an idea will come. Who knows how it happens? I always say it's like there's a man in another room with the whole film together, but they're in puzzle parts. And he's flipping one piece at a time into me. And at first it's very abstract. I don't know, I have a clue. More pieces come, more ideas are caught. It starts forming a thing. And then one day, there it is. So there is, in a way, there's no original ideas. It's just the ideas that you caught. That the thing is to be true to the idea. A lot of artists think that suffering is necessary, but in reality, any kind of suffering cramps the flow of creativity. Let's say that Van Gogh, every time he went out and painted, he got diarrhea. It wouldn't be so good for him to go out. He'd have to be really crazy. Happiness in the doing is so important, and I always say it's our life going by. And then this creativity flowing, ideas are easier to catch, and ideas that could take you out of drudgery work and lead you to someplace, some fantastic things. Trillions and zillions of ideas, and they're all there bubbling and ready to be caught. Monkey would knock this thing out of the park. She is such a fantastic actress. Laura Dern. She could play anything.
I got a call that he wanted to meet me at Bob's Big Boy to see if Kyle MacLachlan and I could get along or something.
I used to go to Bob's Big Boy restaurant, and I went there for 7 years. Every day at 2:30. Not Chinese dentist time. It was a Chinese dentist time, but I went there because I like to have a chocolate milkshake.
We ordered malts and French fries.
And there was a silver goblet shake. It wasn't really ice cream. It was a thing they put into a thing called a Taylor machine, and it would get cold, and they'd pull the lever, and it would come out in kind of a tube of ice cream and fill this goblet. And I liked this chocolate milkshake. I had these things for 7 years with a cup of coffee, and I would write on the napkins.
David was doodling on napkins while Kyle was doodling with a knife into his ketchup. And I mean, a girl either goes, these are really bizarre men and they're twin souls, or I'm in love with both these people and want to spend the rest of my lives with them, which is how I responded.
And I would write on the napkins. It was like having a desk, and you need paper. There's a piece of paper, and you write on it when you get ideas.
Ideas are so beautiful, and they're so abstract, and they do exist someplace. I don't know if there's a name for it, and I think they exist like fish, and I believe that if you sit quietly like you're fishing, you will catch ideas. The real, beautiful big ones swim kind of deep down there, so you have to be very quiet and, wait for them to come along.
If you catch an idea, any idea, it wasn't there, and then it's there. It might just be a small fragment of, like I say, a feature film or a song or a lyric or whatever, but you got to write that idea down right away. And as you're writing, sometimes it's amazing how much comes out, from that one flash. So you get an idea, and it is like a seed. And in your mind, the idea is seen and felt. And it explodes like it's got electricity and light connected to it, and it has all the images and the feeling, and it's like in an instant the idea in an instant. Then the thing is translating that to some medium. It could be a film idea or a painting idea or a furniture idea. It doesn't matter. It wants to be something. It's a seed for something. So the whole thing is translating that idea to a medium. And in the case of film, it takes a long time, and you always need to go back and stay true to that idea. The film is the thing. You work so hard, after the ideas come, to get this thing built
all the elements to feel correct, the whole to feel correct, in this beautiful language called cinema.
These paintings have been viewed by undoubtedly thousands of people, maybe millions, but they're rarely seen. They're never really analyzed, they're never really contemplated, but they are works of art nonetheless. Someone sat down, planned them, designed them, painted them, and finalized them. To some of you, they might feel off, like they haven't been put into the right context, or there's something very big that's missing from them. And that's because there is. This is all background art for Lego sets. One of the very first things you learn about design, this great, seemingly obvious revelation, is that everything that is not from nature is designed. Anything from the most magnificent monument to something as small as a toothpick. Someone somewhere had to sit down, usually sketch out their idea, and develop it. For pretty much every building and every product out there, and the stuff surrounding that product, the packaging and presentation, also had to be designed and developed. Someone had to make something they knew wasn't going to be consciously appreciated by most people, and put the effort and work required to make it presentable, even when a lot of it was going to be covered up. In this case, the art director and illustrator Chris Barrett made these. The reason some of these backgrounds feel off is because they're not really meant to be seen this way. Usually they have a large Lego set in the middle, general set information, piece count, logos, all this other stuff that obscures about 40 to 50% of it. So when you take all this stuff away, when you remove it from its context, the result is this very empty image. They have no people, not even minifigures. There's not even a focal point, really. This feeling I get from looking at them is loneliness, obviously, but also a kind of odd, very slight, unsettling tinge, as if I'm not really supposed to be looking at these. Because, well, I'm not really. They're designed to be filled in with something else that gives it life. This feeling I get, and this subject matter, is similar in some ways to a recent surge of semi-viral photo compilations that you may or may not have seen pop up in your recommended. These types of photos, these often low-quality, atmospheric, lonely, nostalgic, and in many ways deeply uncanny images, have gathered a small cult following of sorts. The locations that these photos depict, many have referred to as liminal spaces. The backrooms are probably the biggest, baddest, most famous example of a liminal space. They're basically an idea devised by a very simple creepypasta that has been continuously expanded and made famous through other posts, video games, memes, and YouTube videos. The original post describes how if you no-clip out of reality, which is a video game term that refers to when a player passes through what are supposed to be physical objects and boundaries, you will find yourself in an endless maze of rooms, carpet, and fluorescent lights that extends for 600 million square miles. So you're basically trapped there. This photo is usually the go-to image to give someone a good idea of what the backrooms are. It's a photo that depicts the yellowed, decaying walls and carpet of some old office space or storage room that, to my knowledge, no one knows the true location of. This creepypasta is especially unique because unlike other stories, the fear for the most part does not come from some mysterious creature, but the setting itself. There have been a lot of lore-extending posts that try to describe things like levels and such, and that's all fine and dandy, but I think the simplicity of the concept, the visceral idea of being trapped in an uncomfortable place, isolated and permanently cut off from the world you once knew, and that it can just happen randomly, is already pretty disturbing. Now, I called the Backrooms the most famous example of a liminal space before defining liminal space, because it gives you a good idea of what I'm trying to get at. Liminal space is pretty much the most accepted term for these kinds of images on the internet. The definition of liminal, according to Google, is 1. Relating to a transitional or initial stage of a process, or 2. Occupying a position at or on both sides of a boundary or threshold.
Mario! It's me, Mario!
Hello, this is Chris Pratt from Eurogamer, and you're about to watch a walkthrough of one of, if not the most iconic levels in video games. It's Super Mario Bros., it's World 1-1, and, well, we asked Shigeru Miyamoto, as well as Takashi Tezuka, if they wouldn't mind talking us through it. They've also done something similar for a level they created in Super Mario Maker, and you can find a link to that at the end of this video. But until then, thanks for watching.
大きいマリオの手応えっていうのが僕らは最初狙ってたんですけども、ちっちゃいマリオを見てからの方が大きいマリオの手応えがあるだろうっていうので、ちっちゃいマリオを作ろうってことになったんです。それでちっちゃいやつが大きくなる魔法のアイテムは何かっていろいろ考えたら、もう怪しい森にあるキノコ以外世の中世界にはないとそれで始まりました。でこうやってガーッと歩いていって、なんかまあ何か出てきたら避けるでしょうってこうで、なんかハテナってついてるので叩くだろうねって言って叩くとポインって言って嬉しいので次のハテナをポインって叩くと出てくる。いやーって逃げようと思ったら当たってしまう。で当たってしまったつもりが大きくなったっていうので、ここでものすごく嬉しくなる。でこうなると突然こうボンボンボンってこう潰せるので嬉しくなって、でここで大体マリオがどんなゲームかが分かる。ただこの頃のゲームはシンプルなのでチュートリアルとかわざわざそういうものを作らなくてもよかったですね。そしてもう一つ大事なことが、こんな話全部してしまうとなんか夢がないような気もする。いいですか一旦します。このクリボーグンバが出てくるんですけど、これ実は最初いなかったんですよ。最初からクッパが出てきて、でクッパを踏んで甲羅にして蹴るっていうゲームなんですけど、いきなり初めての人が甲羅を踏んで蹴るってすごい難しいけど、亀ならやっぱり踏めないとおかしいので、じゃあ亀じゃないやつで敵を作ろうというので、キノコの裏切り者というのを作ろうと。本当はだからこれどっちかというとブラックマッシュルームみたいな絵を描いたんですけど、プログラマーがこれを見て 栗だ栗だってチェスナッツっていう風になってクリボーという名前になったんです。でこの辺りから B ダッシュをちょっとずつ教えるようにで、あ、そうか、それで初めて穴があるんですね。で穴は飛び越すんですけど、こうなってると上の方でちょっと深い穴で大体落ちるんですね。こうして落ちても大丈夫なようにしたんです。こう自然に人のしそうなことをこうやりながらちょっとずつ教えていって、で何かというと、多分遊ぶ人は自分が何をしてるか分かることが一番大事だと思うんですよ。だから最初のステージというのは自分が何をしてるのかが分かるようにして、その後は分かった人はもう遊んでくれるので自由に遊んでくれっていうふうにいつもゲームを作るようにして、だから一旦自分で考えて自分がこうしようということを考えるようになると、もうその人のものになるので、そうするともうそれを裏切るものとか期待するものをどんどん上から乗せていく。自分自身でもそう思うんですけど、瀬倉さんたちも言うんですけど、大体自分がこれがいいなと思って作ったコースは2レベル、2の2ぐらいなので、2の1ぐらいなので、2の1を作ってから最初のところを最後に作るっていうのが普段の作り方にしてます。大体モニターテストをするんですけども、僕モニターテストの時に決めてるのは、説明書で説明を読んでもらうのはいいんですけど、自分では絶対説明しないで、後ろで黙って見てるっていうことでやるんですけど、大体自分がこれが面白いなと思って作ったものを遊んでもらって黙って見てると、もう目を覆うようなことが多くて、ああそうかそう思うかとか、全然自分が思ったように遊んでくれないことが大抵ですね。
でこのグンバっていうキャラクターは割と最後に作った。
そういうのを見つけた時すっごい喜ぶんだ最初ドンキーコングで作った時は、まず一旦飛んでしまうと空中で移動できなかったんですね。それと自分の身長より高いところから落ちたらもうガッて死んでたんですよ。で、自由度が低いなっていうので、マリオブラザーズの時に高いところから落ちても大丈夫だから空中に飛びながらも少し移動できるっていうふうにして、それをだんだんと進化させてきて、今では壁を切って飛ぶところまで来ました。たまに言われると思う、スーパーマリオってこう滑りすぎるっていうもっときちっと止まれれば優しいのに滑るから難しい。だからマリオシリーズたんびに滑る量が違うんですけども、実はけどこれって紙に描いた絵なんですね。ゲームの中で1枚の紙に描いた絵で、紙に描いた絵がペラッペラッって動いて、こうしても実際こういう人が走って振り返ってジャンプして、この重量で地面にドンと降りるっていう風度の重量感って実はないんですよ。普通にプログラムで動かしたら紙に見えるんです。で特に 3D のマリオになるともっとそうなんですけど、これのものの重量感がないんです。だから分かりやすい 3D は着地した時に少し止まってるんです。アニメーションが止まってるんですけども、本当に止まるとアクションゲームとして気持ちよくないので、止まったままで滑ってるんです。でそれがこのただの絵が重量感を持ってイメージできるためにやってるいろんな処理で、そういう細かいところをシリーズごとに違うところにこだわっていろいろ作ってる。だからこういうアクションマリオのゲームっていろんなチームに作ってもらってるんですけども、このアクションのマリオのゲームだけは僕らの内部のチームで以外では作らないように。
僕はスーパーマリオ3っていうのはちょっと思い出深いです。でこれ初めてディレクションを任されたものなんですけどね。で慣れなくてこう自分で絵も描きながら企画も決めていってっていうのがすごく大変で、制作にものすごい時間をかけてしまいました。でいろんな人に助けてもらってやっとこう完成したっていう、そういうのでちょっと自分にとっては思い出深いです。
僕はね、やっぱり最初のこのスーパーマリオは自分がゲームデザイナーっていう仕事をね、自分で語れる名乗れるようになったと。ゲームデザイナーという仕事がなかったので、それまで会社にも、それがちゃんと通用するようになったので大事なんですけども、やっぱりチャレンジとしてはスーパーマリオ64でいろいろ3D にマリオをして、そこでこうカメラが動きながら 3D のアクション、さっきのアクションを仕上げていく。これがやっぱり自分にとってはすごい新鮮で、たくさんのことを見つけて、それから世の中の 3D の技術に詳しい人たちってそういう人形を使って演出をしてみたいなことをあんまり興味を持ってない F1 カーがこう走ってるだけみたいなものを作ってる人たちが多いし、その中で自分がやってることが誰も気が付いてないものをいっぱい見つけるのがすごい楽しかった。
Here's a quick game for you. You are about to see a sentence pop up on screen. When it does, count the number of F's you see in the sentence and then hold on to that number. Ready? Go. Okay, how many F's did you count? 2, 3? Most people will count 3, but there are actually 6 letter F's in this sentence. You may have missed the F's in the word of. If you got them all, congratulations, you were sharp. But if you only saw 3, don't worry, that's perfectly normal. Automaticity is a cognitive phenomena that occurs when we overlearn something or spend so much time on a skill that it just becomes second nature to us. We can do that thing with minimal conscious effort. Reading is just such a skill, and since it is primarily automatic for us, it's hard for us to focus on each and every letter when our minds want to just read, like we usually do. The Stroop effect, where folks struggle to say the actual color of the text instead of just reading it, is challenging for the same reason. But automaticity is an experience that extends much farther than just reading. Under the right circumstances, it can help a golfer imagine a shot, a pianist play a complex melody, and a speedrunner make setting a world record look easy. I'm Daryl, this is Psych of Play, and today we're going to take a deeper look at automaticity and how speedrunners get out of their head to get into the zone. You've probably heard that practice makes perfect, and though perfection is realistically hard to come by, practice does develop automaticity. But how much practice? Well, that depends on what skill you're trying to develop. How long does it take to learn to do something, and how long does it take to overlearn something? In 1978, psychologist Carl Binder defined overlearning as practice of a skill beyond 100% accuracy or beyond a successful performance. And in 1986, Judith Ivory added learning beyond the point needed for immediate recall. So in other words, practice until you can do it right, and then keep going until right is second nature. And this is exactly what you'd be after if you are someone like speedrunner Nicrovita, who was kind enough to chat with me and answer some questions for this video. 2 weeks ago, Nicro set the world record for the any percent run of Super Mario Odyssey. At the time of the interview, he was world number 6, and at the time of me recording this, he sits at world number 1. An impressive resume, but he only got there by spending a whopping 2,500 hours practicing. A casual run of Mario Odyssey typically takes around 13 hours, but top-level Odyssey runners can shave it down to about 1 hour and some change. So to say that Nicrovita has overlearned the skill of speedrunning this game would be an understatement. The same goes for Celeste runner Sushi, who is currently world number 3 in any percent. Sushi told me he probably has around 450 hours into Celeste, which is a comparatively much shorter run at around 30 minutes. So as you can see, the amount of time to overlearn varies, and obviously depends entirely on what one is learning. But what exactly makes automaticity work? High repetition develops it, but what is the mind actually doing when it develops that muscle memory? I read an article recently called The Neuropianist. The author talked about an old study performed in the 80s that found elite pianists could often play at a speed of 30 notes per second, which is much faster than human visual reaction times. Harvard psychologist Carl Lashley surmised that in order to perform a task like this, it cannot be premeditated or consciously planned out. Your fingers will only go as fast as your mind can plan the next action or read the next line of music. To play like the elite, you have to be able to hit notes in such a small window of time that you can't react to each note individually. He concluded that the ability to perform fast sequences of precise movements like this can only be explained by a single plan or mental chunk that encompasses the entire sequence. In other words, elite pianists don't think keystroke for keystroke, they think section by section. Their muscle memory clumps a series of movements together and then performs them from a single mental command. And the same goes for speedrunning. There are incredibly small windows, or frames to be precise, that require specific button inputs and combinations when the time comes in a run. And to think about each and every one of those individual frames for a half hour or more would be mentally exhausting and wildly inefficient. When I asked M. Sushi if he focused on each and every button input or just zoned out and went on autopilot in a run, he said, "Oftentimes when I think input by input, I might jumble and confuse myself, or just end up being flat out slow. Usually I like to think in terms of the game mechanics, not inputs. For example, in Celeste, I wouldn't consider a hard trick to be a Konami code type sequence. I'd think that I need to do a hyperdash into a bunny hop and things of that sort." So instead of thinking in terms of individual steps to an action, M. Sushi just thinks of the verb, and that's a textbook sign of automaticity, chunking a set of practiced complex actions into a single mental command. Driving is a complex process. You have to understand traffic, how the car works, where you're going, how to react to signs, and so on. But rarely do any of us think about these things. Typically we just think, time to drive, and then 10 minutes and 3 Kesha songs later, we're magically there. We even read in chunks. If you couldn't find the F's in that sentence earlier, it was because your mind automatically processes the entire word at once and then moves on to the next. The letters were in there, sure, but those are like the button inputs and notes, which we usually don't think about individually when something is overlearned. So automaticity is something you'd want to develop if you'd like to excel in any given skill. There is a lot to be gained from allowing yourself to just perform the action, because oftentimes it will eliminate errors that you might make if you were consciously planning each movement. It lets you relax and execute your job well without overthinking it. Although it sounds counterintuitive, it seems that letting yourself get out of the way of your performance or even zoning out can have its benefits. When I asked Nicrovita if his mind ever wandered during a run, he said, "It definitely depends. I tend to read chat a lot and it takes my mind off the run. I kind of let my muscle memory take me away and it works quite often. There have been many times where I've gotten a best split or a gold and was surprised because I felt I was barely paying attention. I've noticed that not 100% focusing on what I'm doing in the game has benefited me many times." So all you need to do to be an incredible speedrunner is develop automaticity from hours of practice, and then you can set records in your sleep, right? Well, not exactly. There is a caveat to the muscle memory, and the getting out of your way is a double-edged sword. Have you ever gotten up from the couch, walked to your bedroom, turned on the light, and then froze because you completely forgot what you came in here for? Or have you ever opened up a piece of candy and then absent-mindedly thrown the candy away and put the wrapper in your mouth? If so, rest assured, you're not alone, and there is a name for this. In 1979, J.T. Reason ran a series of surveys and found that a lot of people experience these absent-minded motor errors. Driving to the wrong place, putting shaving cream on a toothbrush, turning on the light as you leave a room, the list goes on. He called these actions not as planned, or ANAPs for short. Reason pointed out that all these activities are highly practiced and routine. Without conscious double-checking, we don't always catch the obvious errors. And this is the snake in the grass of automaticity. It lets you do incredible things without much thought, and it even eliminates errors in precise movements. But if left unchecked, it can make you look silly by doing the right thing in the wrong way. When asked if he ever forgets portions of his runs, Nicro said, "It randomly hits me like a truck, where I'll forget what button I'm pressing, or for a split second I make myself believe that the jump button is something else, and I freak out for a second. I don't know what causes it, but it has happened before." When entering or exiting a loading zone in Odyssey, a vast majority of the time you buffer a spin pound roll where you want to go after the transition screen goes away. And because the transition always looks the same, if I'm not really paying attention, I'll forget where I am in the level and go the wrong way. So the takeaway here is that automaticity in its purest sense works on a sliding scale. An activity like your heart beating is 100% automatic, with completely zero conscious effort. Speedrunning a game is semi-automatic. Although there are portions that you can get through on muscle memory alone, you'll need to bring yourself back down to earth regularly. Sushi made this clear when I asked if his mind ever wandered during a run. He said, it's definitely a subconscious kind of thing, however, focus is still extremely important. I usually find my runs are better when my full attention is on the game and not my chat or my appetite or whatever could be a possible distraction. So, although you can relax and let your performance happen, staying dialed in at least to some degree will help you minimize the amount of A-naps. And I think that's just as true for speedrunning as it is for any performance, so we all may have something to take away from the studies I mentioned here. To wrap up, I'd like to mention something unexpected that can blossom from automaticity. There is a scholarly argument that when something can be done automatically with little conscious effort, this can breed creativity. When things are invented or discovered, most often it's not preconceived or premeditated. Usually new ideas are just stumbled upon. You might have heard someone say, "It just came to me." Since automaticity is an unconscious process that often springs into action on its own, it may lend itself to creative thought. In other words, when your mind can perform complex actions subconsciously, it may also subconsciously realize new ways that those actions can be used. It may see new possibilities that you wouldn't consider if you were consciously thinking about it on a surface level. And I think that's why the speedrunning community can constantly find new ways to cut time and develop new strategies. Sports psychologist Jay Brunza once said of Tiger Woods that his genius was not how far he hit the ball, but instead his creativity in the short game. The footage is a bit dated, but I'll leave you with these words from Tiger, where he describes what each shot is like. If you're like me, you'll find that the gap between elite athletic performance and elite esport performance may be smaller than people think.
I tend to have these blackout moments where I don't remember. I know I was there, but I don't remember actually performing the golf shot. I get so entrenched on the moment, I guess my subconscious might take over. I don't know what the whole terminology is, but there are many putts or many shots where I don't remember hitting. I remember seeing the ball flight. I remember preparing for the shot, pulling the club out of the bag, and once I'm behind the ball, I'm walking in the shot, I don't remember until I see the ball leave. It's a weird thing.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. I am thrilled that I was finally able to make this episode. I've been planning it for a long time now, but I knew I needed to do at least some level of my own research to connect automaticity and speedrunning. So a massive shout out goes to Microvita and Sushi. Thank you both a ton for helping me make this happen. Be sure to go check out their streams because their skill at these games is nothing short of tremendous. And
Research shows that people today have trouble prioritizing their hobbies. As many as 6 out of 10 would want to spend more time on outdoor activities. So, how can we find a better balance between work and passion? Can they be the same thing? In this interview, I meet Mark Watts, son of the Zen philosopher Alan Watts, who created the legendary Live Fully Now speech. I'm Christopher Triumph, and this is Live Fully Now. If you don't mind me asking, who are you?
I'm Mark Watts. I'm head of the Alan Watts Center. My father was a philosopher who influenced a lot of people by introducing them to Eastern ideas. At a young age, I began to follow him around and record him. And he has a portable tape deck, so I would take the tape deck and follow him to the recording site. And that began a career of field recording for me.
Who was your father, Alan Watts?
Well, my father was an Englishman. He was born during the First World War, 1915. And his mom was a teacher at a boarding school. And many of the students there were the children of missionaries on their way to China. They would leave their children there, and then when they came back, they would bring her gifts. And these would end up in the parlor. And Alan wasn't allowed to go in there and play because he might break something, but he would sneak in. And he was fascinated with these landscapes and just the images that he saw. And then soon he found a book called Glimpses of Forgotten Japan, and that was it. After that, he was off. Everything he could read about Eastern religion and philosophy, he just consumed.
My goodness, don't you remember when you went first to school? The idea was to push along, going up and up to the great moment in which you're ready to go out into the world. And then, suddenly, you wake up one day and say, huh? I've arrived. And while it is of tremendous use for us to be able to look ahead and to plan, there is no use planning for a future, which when you get to it and it becomes a present, you won't be there. You'll be living in some other future which hasn't yet arrived. You can't live at all unless you can live fully now.
I enjoy that talk very much. I think he was addressing a fundamental intellectual confusion that we have. If you're in a state of distraction, the moment is lost on you completely. And whatever it is now may just be something cast away.
And your father worked somewhere in this area?
Yes, just to the south on the slopes of Mount Tamalpais, he had a wonderful little cabin where he would go to get away and write. And next to it, he built a library from a water tank. It's now in a state of returning to nature, but it has a really original beauty to it. We don't see things usually in that way, but the Japanese have a word, aware, which means delicious loneliness. And so even though it's in the process of being covered by leaves and debris, I think that it has a rich and deep soulful feeling still. Well, of course, it holds a lot of memories, visiting my father there, and lots of great experiences with him. It's also the place where my father passed away, and his ashes are there. So it has deep significance in that way. But it's also, because of the way it manifests his work at that time, it's the seeds of what we're doing now.
Could you give us an advice on how to live fully now?
As my father used to say, you have to go out of your mind to come to your senses. And it's important to go crazy at least once a day, in the sense of breaking the continuity of thought.
Thank you so much, Mark.
A pleasure.